Hello, and welcome to this Disadvantaged Business Enterprise presentation. My name is Chris Baker. I am a DBE Supportive Services Representative, and today we're going to be talking about tuning up your small business, including elements of modern efficiency, growth, and what that means, and some overlooked strategies. So, here's what we'll be covering in the upcoming slides. We're going to be talking about becoming X% more efficient. The reason why I have it set up that way is you see a lot of articles or theories floating around about become 5%, 10%. There's always an arbitrary number associated with that. So this is just X% more efficient. In fact, we're going to be talking about the mentality of looking for ways to improve efficiency and not really worrying about the percentage. We're going to touch on growth versus scale, why those are different terms, what makes them different, and why understanding that difference can kind of be a make or break thing in a lot of different scenarios. We'll talk about making the digital era work for you rather than fighting the current in ways that there's technology and approaches and, again, a mindset that can help you overcome challenges and offset roadblocks and things like that. Growing your financial literacy, again, more of a mindset thing here. So what that sort of looks like as a small business owner, where you might be the only employee in addition to being the owner in every other role. And setting personal boundaries. This is something that historically has kind of gotten overlooked, but we'll be talking about that kind of mental health aspect in dealing with your interpersonal relationships in your family while you're trying to, grow your business and follow your dreams. So your objective today is identify areas of reasonable improvement, right? And your tool to help do that is your perspective and your mindset. These are things that you can apply, whether it's mentally, strategically, even emotionally, and then also products and services. So it's about actionable concepts, not just high level theories for your mindset, but also actionable items that you can look into. You can research and you can apply if you choose. So on this first one, it's important to start out that this sort of current theme going through all of these slides is that mindset, right? And so without a change in mindset as a small business owner, you can end up missing things. In other words, if you don't know what to look for in the first place, how are you going to find it? And that could be a problem, a solution, something that hurts you, something that helps you. And having a flexible mindset in this concept of tuning up your small business becomes pretty important. So what do we mean by becoming X% more efficient? And why is it a deflationary approach? Now, of course, it's 2023 when this is being recorded. We're all painfully familiar with the concept of inflation. And so from that aspect, deflationary sounds good. But what that means as it applies to your small business is it's really about fighting inflation creep. So inflation creep, unfortunately, not an individual, but rather a concept of how overall economic inflation versus what you see at the store, like, wow, eggs are really expensive, this month or something like that. Inflation creep is how that sort of trickles down, domino effects into everything else. And so inflation creep ends up affecting your business because it drives up the costs of goods and services. And that's, a little bit at a time, over time, across the board. And so we want to think about how that's affecting the different operational aspects of your business, essentially. So think of yourself in the position of the modern world. And we don't necessarily mean New York or Instagram or something like that, but think of yourself in the modern living reality that you and your business inhabit. So what we want to look for are some immediate, minimal to medium efforts that you can take to increase efficiency. And in building this mindset and focusing on this concept, there's a term called incremental advantage that can be a huge help to your overall mindset as a small business owner. Incremental advantage is really nothing more than gaining ground by tiny little bits at a time, right? It's overwhelming if you think about This is the goal I want to be at. This is what I'd like to be. This is how many sales I want to make. This is how many contracts I want to win. Those goals are good, but by focusing way up on the peak of the mountain too much, you're going to miss what's right in front of your feet. And so that's what we mean by incremental advantage. It's about, well, there's a fundamental sales principle, and that holds true across a lot of different facets of life. Every small percentage adds up. So your count or your goal or whatever the thing is, you need those metrics, that's great, but you can't let them rule your life. One sale, a single positive connection, a 1% gain in efficiency is worth celebrating, right? Because you identified something, you took the win, and on to the next thing. And that's where the concept of this next mentality comes into play. A next mentality means that you're sort of engaging in an amount of reflection and humility regarding a loss or a failure or a mistake or something that went terribly wrong that was entirely out of your hands, all that negative stuff, and the positive things too. Something happens, celebrate it or learn from it, and on to the next thing. Having that next mentality lets you add up the wins, shrug off the losses, and keep working on that incremental advantage. It's a really, really powerful mindset to have when you are approached with setbacks, and also helps you keep focused when you have a really big win. So that's the connection between those terms there. Now, when you focus on the opportunities on your current radar, you can devote more energy to closing on them, right? You know what to look for, you know how to identify them, and if you're able to make a gain on it, you can move on to the next thing. If you're consistent with this approach, your goal is going to become more in reach anyway. It's going to be more attainable because of the gains that you're making. But you're focused in a more practical sense on, okay, I won something or I lost something. What's the next thing? So where can we find these sorts of percentages? So as you can see on the slide here, this matters because recovering time and effort in small chunks means big gains going forward. That's the benefit of actually applying this. As you save a little bit more money, as you recover a little bit more of your time and increase the efficiency of your efforts just a little bit over time, it's going to be that much more powerful going forward in the future. So the first place to look is the overall timescape of your business. If time is money, and this is kind of where we say the new meaning of time is money, that phrase has been around forever. But if we think about it, if time is money, then lost time equals lost money. And so it follows from that making these small changes, investing in tools and improvements, looking for those efficiency gains can help you recoup lost time. And this holds true at scale, day to day, week to week, month over month, and so forth and so on. So in the operational context of a business, get some of your time back, and you'll likely find yourself with some extra money. Okay, so we're on to the next one here, growth versus scale, why the difference can make or break you. This doesn't get talked about a lot, especially at the small business level, but it is a crucial concept that I've seen time and time again with business owners and operations of all different shapes and sizes. So what we want to figure out is, what is the difference and why does it matter? The essential difference here is that business growth does not equal bank account growth. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that the concept of growth itself is highly dependent on its context. So if you're talking about growing your bank account, that's an easy one. It's an easy idea. We all get it. We all probably wish we could do it better. But we understand that there is this sort of place, a retainer for the money, and you put savings in there over time. It grows. You put more of something into a place, and over time, You have lots and lots of that something. That's an extremely simple example of growth. Growth in a business is a lot different from that concept in the way it works out, just because a business has so many more variables. And that's where the concept of scale comes into play. So if we think about the idea of the bank account, there's basically two variables that affect the account itself. There's obviously a lot more variables in our lives and our businesses that affect our financial situation, but just concerning the bank account, you have two variables: money that goes in and money that comes out. Your business and its operations, a much more complex system. The first variable, for example, is you, the person you are, the knowledge you have, the choices you make, your physical health. These are all variables that can impact your business day to day. Likewise, things like your savings, your operating capital, your credit, your office, your vehicles, tools, computers, and your family too, right? Friends, children, obligations. These are all variables that affect your business. And at an even wider scope, things like the weather, the economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we talk about growth and scale, it's a lot different than just growing something in a garden or growing a bank account. Really based on your approach. So from that aspect, we know that it's easy to grow something. You simply do more of that thing. We talk about business, that's more leads, more bids, more sales, more hours worked, and so forth. However, as a small business owner, whether it's just yourself or you have just a few employees, whatever the scenario is, as a small business owner, you have a limit. You have a ceiling that you cannot surpass when it comes to growth. You're one person. There's not something wrong with you. You're a human trying to run a business. And there's only so many variables that an individual person can handle alone. Now that's where the concept of scale comes into play. And this is why it's important, I feel, to know the difference, what the context is, and why it matters. This is more of, again, another mindset issue. Okay? So the concept of scaling is really nothing more than sustainable growth, right? So if we're growing something, then we just want it to grow, and it's a simple approach and a simple system, and we just grow it. Scaling is sustainable growth. It is smart, intelligent growth. It's you're growing at a feasible rate supported by a smart foundation that you built. Sometimes this means adapting to new technologies or changing your working hours, attending conferences, things like that. However you're choosing to build your smart foundation, this approach always focuses on things that recoup time, expose you to new opportunities, save you money, or let you leverage your skills in a more expanded way than you're capable of alone. So what do you do with this understanding? Like, okay, that all sounds great. I get it. Scale versus growth. Scaling is better. I would like to grow sustainably, and I want to build more of this smart foundation. I imagine most of you watching this have to some degree. That's why you're a small business owner. You've had the know-how and the grit and determination to make something like that work. That means you've got the skills, and you've probably done a lot of this stuff in some way, shape, or form already. So in this case, I think some of the best and most consistently true advice applies. Identify and focus on what you can control, right? So worrying about the things that we can't control, it's natural, it's human, we all do it. I probably do it too much. But when it comes to your business, it really does help to go, okay, what do I have control over? Is it, everything from applying for like the DBE program? If you apply to the DBE program, you got accepted, now you're committed to that. That's an area where you said, I want to help build my foundation and help scale. And this is a certification that can really help do that. It was something that you can control, and so you followed through with it. So think about any other ways that you can do that with your business? Can you block some time to finally design and order those new business cards? Can you hire a local expert to audit your finances, do your taxes? Even just auditing the finances is great, by the way. So could you pay for a software program that automates your point of sale process? The point is, you know your life and your business better than anyone. So be bold about your new ideas for efficiency. Think of some areas where you can gain time, you can find new opportunities, or rein in some costs. And how many cookies do you want to sell? So this term really is just sort of an encapsulation of growth versus scale. An extreme example of growth, if just imagine for the sake of the exercise that you sell cookies, that's your business. If we talk about growth, an extreme example of growth is baking cookies 16 hours a day, maybe more. Maybe you don't have a lot of time to sleep and you're baking cookies around the clock, just yourself if you're selling them locally. That's growth. There's a ceiling, there's a cap, there's only so much you can do with that scenario. Scale, on the other hand, an extreme example of scale as it comes to cookies would be the Nabisco company or something like that. So that's the difference between a business that just grows and a business that scales. Obviously, you're not trying to be Nabisco, but my guess is that you want to be somewhere in between Nabisco and the individual round-the-clock cookie maker. Lastly, why this matters, right? So this is ultimately why it matters. Even if you're content with quote unquote just the way we do things, or business as usual, or I don't really care, or some of this is scary, or I don't really want to get involved with more technology, I get it, and that's fine, but this is why it matters, because even if you're content with that, your competitors are not. And whether those are competitors in the same state, or if you consider maybe other small businesses to be competition in other states, whatever your whole market space is, chances are your competitors are already doing the things that we're going to be talking about, and maybe even looking at things in a way through the lens of this mindset that we're talking about: incremental advantage, increasing efficiency, and figuring out ways to make small gains. Okay, so making the digital era work for you. Work for you, not against you. I know a lot of times it probably feels like it is working against you. Things change at a rapidly evolving rate, especially in the last few years. Like it or not, we were already in the middle of a digital revolution in terms of work over the last 10, 20 years. And the last few years especially have really accelerated that and disrupted that in a lot of ways. So the landscape can be confusing, and that's why we want to focus on, well, how can we make this work for you? How can we simplify this? What can I do? So the digital pivot is real, whether we like it or not. This reality is virtually inescapable. If you own a small business, absolutely inescapable. The question you need to ask with something like this, especially if you have an aversion to adopting new technologies or trying to find tools that can greatly enhance your productivity and your profits, the question is, how can I leverage this? That's oftentimes a good question to ask when you're presented with something that is challenging or scary or new, or you sort of immediately are maybe disgusted with the concept, right? Having that mindset of, wait, how can I leverage this to my benefit? How can I gain from this? There is no better realm to do that in today than in the digital era, and how there's apps for everything, and there are ways to automate stuff, and these different kind of mindset approaches. All the stuff that we're talking about really comes from nothing more than that basic question of, how can I profit from this? Remember, time equals money. Get some of your time back, get some of your money back. That's all about incremental advantage. So, email has been around for over 40 years. I bring that up because, so here's the thing. The act of sending a message between two people at separate computers has been possible since 1963. I'm not going to bore you guys with the whole story, but fast forwarding through this little history lesson, by 1971, the use of secure computer networking allowed someone to send a message to multiple users. And for those users to respond, this was a big deal back then, of course. That was also the first time somebody used the @ symbol as a marker for who they were. So that was the first username, 1971. But of course, by the mid 80s, businesses were using local networks to just have this internal email system. And by 1995, really is kind of the turning point for the World Wide Web, for the internet, and email at a standardized protocol. And so the reason I bring that up is I would like to ask if it would surprise you to learn that email, when it came out, did experience significant pushback from some people. Hail as old as time, right? You can probably go back to somebody, if we could get in a time machine and go back to the invention of the wheel, there would probably be somebody complaining about that and talking about how the wheel was a bad thing, right? So, but people would say things like, well, can't I just make a phone call? Or I don't really trust computers. Or gosh, I think I would just rather write it on a piece of paper and send it. At least I know it got there. I mean, who knows where it goes if you send it in a computer? That's over 40 years ago. And within the span really of less than 30 years, daily life is almost, you couldn't think of, certainly couldn't think of running your small business without email. The reason I bring this up is that, in a sense, resistance to technological change is understandable. It's like, why fix what isn't broken, right? That statement can sometimes be a trap, and here's why. Going back to our email example, paper mail isn't broken. Email wasn't trying to fix paper mail. Paper mail is sometimes still your only option for certain things, and it's never going to go away necessarily. But the goal of email was to increase productivity and reduce errors and save time and money. So that's why that statement of why fix what isn't broken can kind of be a trap sometimes. So pay attention to that if you're thinking about or listening to somebody else talk about a new technology or something you can harness that might help your business. Just keep in mind the history and the lessons that we got from email. What they realized, of course, it didn't take long for businesses to adapt and adopt email. It provides instant, minimally disruptive communication at any time from anywhere in the world. That was a game changer. So now let's think about this. Think about the software that you're already using, right? So easy software wins, big bang for your buck is my little subtitle on this one. And we'll talk about some actual software that you can search and some resources that if you're kind of thinking, oh, I wonder if I want to check out this kind of software, you can go and research it yourself and read what other small business owners have to say. So we'll get to that in a second. But it's likely you already use some software in your daily routine. Microsoft Word, Excel, things like Adobe, QuickBooks, Gmail, your web browser. Those are already software programs that you already use. There are likely other categories of your business operations where you can leverage modern software to save time, reduce bottlenecks, ensure payments, manage projects, etc. So a good example of what we're talking about here is the use of digital payment and paperwork software. If you add a digital payment option, it sort of empowers you to take payments on site wherever your business leads you to be doing an interaction that involves a payment, right? So that's one example. It's also removes the headache of an overcluttered home office. Many digital payment options also allow for digital paperwork, filing, and fillable forms and things like that. In other words, there are payment and paperwork apps, and some of which I have listed here. You can see here on the slide here. Square, PayPal, Clover, Lightspeed, Shopify. You've probably already heard of some of these. But if you're somebody who's taking payments regularly or even just every once in a while, just like with any software product nowadays, there's different levels that these can be subscribed to. Sometimes there's a free version for really small businesses or individual users. Um, but that's probably an easily accessible example of how this would apply to a small business, what we've been talking about leveraging software to help reduce errors, save time, and increase efficiency. So that would be one example. Um, Along with the filing and filling capabilities, some of these, they also allow you to do contracts, arbitration, NDAs, liability waivers, government required forms, in addition to things like invoices and receipts. And that's why these can be so powerful. It's not just about getting paid. It's also about not having things fall through the cracks. Everything it's backed up, it's on the cloud. You've got a link that you can send somebody. You can do your due diligence so much quicker than by mailing an invoice and hoping that you get a check in the mail. So again, if we say that lost time is lost money, tightening up the time span and the turnaround time on things, whether that's communication, planning, meetings, getting paid, all that stuff, the quicker you can make those things happen, the more time that frees up for you to grow and scale your business further. Um, Services, software, and operational changes, of course, can sometimes seem overwhelming, sometimes maybe unnecessary. That's always a first impression, and I completely understand it. They oftentimes come with upfront costs and some variety of learning curve, right? So you commit to getting one of these software programs, and all of a sudden you're going, okay, so it costs this much per month. Well, that means it costs this much per year. Well, there's a little discount if I do the yearly subscription. And then you have to learn how to use it, and all of a sudden it doesn't seem to be worth the trouble. But the thing to keep in mind is return on investment. So if, say, $500 for a software service and a few days or a week of a couple hours here and there of a learning curve of using it, if to you that doesn't sound like a good investment, think about it in terms of return on investment. This is an arbitrary one that I came up with, obviously, but if you could spend, this is the thought exercise question, if you could spend $500 today to save your company $5,000 over the next year, that's a 900% return on investment. Again, totally made up the example, but apply that approach to the concept of investing your time and money in tools that will directly help your business. Think about it like adding LED lights to your house. I don't know how many of you have done that yet, maybe partially in some cases, but an LED light bulb costs quite a bit more than an old-fashioned incandescent light bulb. So you could maybe spend $2 on an old-fashioned light bulb, and the LED counterpart is $12. And that's like, oh my gosh, it's an extra $10 for one light bulb. Well, yeah, it costs more, especially if you're going to redo all the light bulbs in your house. Definitely, that's kind of a little out-of-pocket expense over the weekend, right? But as soon as you install those, then your energy bill every month going forward is going to be less. There's also incentives from power companies and co-ops and even federal tax breaks that come from doing energy initiatives like that. So that's an example I like to share when talking about return on investment. If you're spending $12 now to save a lot more than that over the course of the next year, and then extrapolate that out at scale. Because remember, we're not quote unquote fixing what isn't broken. The original light bulb was not broken. It worked well for over 100 years. It's just that now we have some newer versions of that same technology that are more efficient. What you're after is a tool or multiple tools that help you to grow, scale, earn more, and keep more of what you earn. So these are some good examples here. There's a lot more out there. We'll also cover some research tips for software as well. I'm going to touch on this briefly as well, e-signature apps. So this is something like examples here: DocuSign, Blue Ink, PandaDoc. These are really just document signing apps that allow you to, say, send a contract back and forth. People use it, they use a digital signature, and it gets sent back to you. You can print it right there, so there's no actual in-person that has to happen. Definitely defer to legal experts when deciding what to use and what applies and what doesn't. But I got to tell you guys, 99% of the contract related transactions that I've seen in the small business sense and in the legal and estate sense over the last, real estate as well, over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, probably longer than that, the bulk of those individual document transactions have been done using some kind of an e-signature app. So definitely something to consider there as a time and expense saver. Okay, and on this one, a little bit more about the software question and leveraging the offerings the digital era has for you as a small business owner to help put you on equal footing with competitors who probably have a lot more capital and maybe were early adopters of this technology. And so scheduling apps, absolutely wanted to touch on this one. If you guys haven't investigated any scheduling apps like Calendly, I would highly recommend that you do so. In fact, Gmail and Outlook both now have built-in scheduling apps into their email programs that also sync with those calendars. They're a little bit more buried in Gmail and Outlook. Calendly is an app and also an extension you can add to your browser. But essentially, here's what they do. They link your calendar, whichever calendar you choose. It links directly to your calendar. And then when you send that meeting link to somebody else, or they click on that link, it connects to their calendar. This is all happening in the background. And so what it lets you guys do is one or the other party can pick a meeting time, and it automatically scans through each calendar to find times that work. So it will automatically present that choice. This is such an invaluable time-saving tool. I can't stress that enough. It really cuts down on back and forth calls to try to get voicemails, trying to get some kind of meeting locked down, or emails, right? You send a single email. Does Tuesday at 3 p.m. work for you? Then you get the response, hopefully that same date, maybe the next day. No, that doesn't work for me. How about Thursday at 1:30? And back and forth it goes until something actually happens. That doesn't have to be just taken as a point of fact of, well, that's how scheduling works. There are apps like Calendly and now built in by Gmail, Outlook, and a lot of other services that allow this kind of automation to happen, where somebody can just click on a link and they can see right in front of them very clearly, these are the actual viable options that you're available for a meeting. They click it, they choose it, they book it, you get notified, and it's just that easy. So we also would like to talk about synchronous versus asynchronous interactions. Sounds really fancy and sciencey and techy, and it's really not. It's just the concept of something happening where two people have to be present at the same time versus where they don't have to be present at the same time. This is one of the key insights you can use to kind of immediately start juicing up your business's growth and scale, especially as it pertains to these software options. The secret is that in traditional methods of payment, documentation, scheduling, and so forth, the interactions have been synchronous, meaning that the success of the interaction itself and the outcome is dependent upon two people doing the same thing at the same time. Now, granted, there's a lot of things that have to happen on a day-to-day basis, especially in your small business, where that is probably required. But The apps that we've discussed allow for asynchronous interactions. That is, the success of the interaction and the outcome are not dependent upon two people doing the same thing at the same time. So things like if you send an email and then somebody responds the next day, that's an asynchronous interaction. You've communicated something, you're not in the same room, and you're not doing something at the same time. If you're talking to somebody on the phone, that's a synchronous interaction. You're both doing something at the same time, you are connected in some fashion and are collaborating. Asynchronous, automated or semi-automated business processes almost always end up dominating the world's workspace, only because they are capable of repeatedly reducing errors and saving time while simultaneously increasing the speed of communication, decision making, and the flow of money. And that's why this matters ultimately, is that if you can find different ways, whether it's the scheduling apps, payment apps, project management software, anything that allows for some amount of automation, not taking the control of anything out of your hands, but automating rote tasks and kind of closing that gap on miscommunication, dropped balls, and lost time sinks. That's the direction that you want to be headed. You want to try to find, using your mindset of incremental advantage, what are the areas of the business that I can increase efficiency? What are some changes that I can make to really close the gaps on these areas? Always look for asynchronous and some kind of automation in the software, and that it capitalizes on that. This matters because embracing time and error saving technology provably saves you dollars and reputation, and that is absolutely true. If nothing else, saving money and potential reputation goofs can be a pretty powerful motivator for adopting new technology. But now let's touch on reviews real quick and how to decide like what software do you want to use, because you don't have to necessarily go with my recommendations in this slideshow. You can do the research on your own and figure out what you want, but I'm going to mention how to do that here in a second. If you're still unsure of adopting newer technology, especially software, the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of your competition is likely not. They're probably not unsure, especially the really successful ones. If you've ever wondered how one person or a small group of people can appear to run a very successful small business almost single-handedly, embracing this kind of technology is a large part of it. Because building these tools into your foundation directly helps you scale. And the reason for that is because it's almost like having an assistant work for you. Think about the things that we've talked about thus far when it comes to software in your small business. We've talked about scheduling appointments, scheduling meetings. We've talked about getting payments, sending invoices, filing legal documents, and things like that. And we have talked about managing customers and projects, all that kind of stuff. Those are roles historically filled by people. And over time, as more processes can be automated by software, we don't need somebody, especially in the context of your small business, you don't need somebody who's just doing all the scheduling and appointments and the legal documents. I mean, you would probably have an employee hired for that if you could afford it. And for those of you who do, that's absolutely wonderful. But adopting these kinds of software applications in your small business, it does become almost like getting another, like say a part-time person or an assistant to do some of this heavy lifting for you, because it closes the gap on those time sinks, those turnarounds, those communication problems. So let's talk about Capterra real quick. Capterra is an independent website. It's not affiliated with any software company. It is an independent review service where every software that you could ever think of that exists right now in the world has ratings on there. So rather than going directly to a software's homepage and reading their testimonials, rather than reading some kind of thread and listening to what one single person said, You can go to Capterra and look up software. You can look it up directly by the title of the software. You can look up categories of software and see what the highest rated ones are. There are so many, I cannot stress this enough. Capterra, there are so many small business owners on there that rate different kinds of software, whether it's for billing or HR or project management, scheduling apps, all the stuff that we've talked about. Capterra has a ton of ratings on there, and many of them are from small business owners. So that's a great place to go if you want to get a handle on some of these efficiency gaps we're talking about, but you're not sure where to start and it's just kind of overwhelming. Just go to Capterra. They're not trying to sell you anything. It's all about the ratings, and I highly recommend it. Okay, growing your financial literacy, owning the concept, and empowering your business. This, just as a quick preface, this is very much a mindset thing as well, kind of that continuing thread throughout this presentation. Myself, I'm not a financial expert. I don't have a background in finance. More of my skills come from writing and editing and technical stuff. But I've learned a couple things about finance, and I'm lucky enough to work in an office with some real financial experts. And what I wanted to synthesize that into today is the way that you think about financial literacy. Obviously, you're going to go to your tax expert, whoever, if you hire somebody to audit your finances, or you're going to read books or take courses online from trained professionals who know exactly what they're talking about. But let's talk about the mindset. So most of us have trouble admitting it, but not many of us are truly financially literate. Another reason why we hire experts and seek out expert advice on this, also because that's the last thing you want to make a mistake on is your finances. But step one really is admitting that, hey, I'm not a finance person. I don't have a degree in finance. I'm not a financial expert. It's okay to admit that. And I apologize if you're listening to this and you are, that was not directed at you. But this is essentially the most crucial component of growth, right? And we talked about growth versus scale before. I'm just talking about growth in that sustainable sense, really both growth and scale combined. Financial literacy is the most vital one out of these concepts, because if you don't have that focus, you don't have that knowledge and don't have that mindset, the other things really are not going to matter ultimately, because you're either going to coast along and keep being lucky, or you're going to run out of steam and it might fall apart. So that's why it's so crucial. Financial knowledge equals operational flexibility. Chances are the more financially literate you become, along with that mindset of looking for incremental advantage, looking for the next thing, and making those small gains, having that financial knowledge as well gives you operational flexibility to be able to say, you know what, I am going to get that software product. Or, you know what, I am going to upgrade my business truck. Because you're always on the lookout for ways to cut costs, improve efficiency, gain some tips on finances, or maybe you implemented something, an operational change or a scheduling change, or a new software back in the day that allowed you to regain some of that time and thus some of your money. And now you have more flexibility to maybe, the sky's the limit. Get the other software programs you want, like I said, trade in your vehicle, or hire a person, maybe your first employee who's not you. But you're not going to get there without that mindset. So it's understandable that a lot of us are not financial experts, but let's reclaim that term, financial literacy. That's really kind of what I'm arguing for here in terms of the mindset. Finance, by its very nature, has a very Wall Street, very suit and tie kind of ultra rich kind of perspective to it, to that terminology, and it doesn't have to. It's everybody should be financially literate no matter what their station in life and no matter what kind of business they have. Mindset of approaching how you want to gain that financial literacy, I think starts with um, kind of ignoring a lot of the buzz around the stock market, whatever the latest talking head is saying about the economy, things like that, multi-layer stock portfolio management. That's fine if you're into that. But as a small business owner, I think we can leave the Wall Street aspect behind for now. It's okay for you to reclaim that term to apply to nothing more than the money your business touches, right? And the social and economic factors that can directly impact you and your own personal finances. I mean, that's really, again, focusing on what you can control. And in that aspect, financial literacy becomes more accessible and more exciting. So, like many small business concepts, when you learn how to define an important term in a way that means something to you, there is value in that initial understanding. You're giving yourself permission to take an abstract term, in this case, financial literacy. It's like plastered all over Forbes, et cetera, the bookstore, the internet, it's everywhere. But you're turning it into something concrete. And concrete is good. Concrete is something you can touch, you can see, you can feel, you can think about it. And be like, how do I want to improve my financial literacy just concerning the money my business touches and the things I have control over? How can I think about that today? Is there anything I've missed? Is there some change that I can make, or a different way to look at my finances, or some education that I can get from a professional? Ultimately, what you're really trying to do, in a very general sense, is be able to get a bird's eye view of your revenue, your costs, your overall business value, and your net situation at any given moment. By doing those spot check analyses, combining them with your long-term analyses, that's the most immediate way to apply this. And from that higher perspective, being able to zoom into a single data point and understand what that means. So like, well, I wonder why profits were so low in March. Or, oh, what is the forecast for this part of the industry look like for the next quarter? Things like that. Staying in touch. And really, financial literacy is just a way of keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on with the money that your business touches and other opportunities that you can have for things like additional funding. Um, Things like SBA loans and grants and stuff like that. So combining these perspectives with the notion of tracking your data and performance over time gives you a look at where you've been, but also where you might be headed. And that's where we have the windshield versus the rear view mirror analogy, right? Because the windshield is so much bigger than the rear view mirror. We need both of them. We need to be able to see behind us, to see things that are behind us that might be a threat, or the weather or something like that. Also check your blind spots, right? That's all important. You need to know where you came from and what happened. But the windshield is so much bigger. So we're looking ahead, we're looking at the road in front of us, checking that rearview mirror. Another aspect of that mindset approach to financial literacy. So, of course, as you can probably guess by now, I'm coming back to this. It's another opportunity for leveraging software and an expert in the field. What I mean by that is an aspect of financial literacy is being able to have that flexibility to be able to say, yes, I'm going to get that software, or yes, I'm going to hire that financial auditor to give me some tough love, something like that. One of the other concepts I want to touch on, and this is also extremely important with small business, is using debt and expense to leverage growth. So things like we mentioned an SBA loan or an expense like buying software. That's using things like debt and expense to leverage the growth of your company. We hear terms like debt and expense, and it's an immediate negative connotation, and that's entirely understandable. Nothing wrong with that. But again, context matters. And so for the context of this discussion of tuning up your small business, being invested in how do I scale this? How can I build my smart foundation? Using the debt and expense that you have access to leverage your growth, cannot stress that enough. So financial literacy, a great example of something you can outsource. You'll obviously still want to keep yourself educated and have meaningful conversations about your business with your accountant, your consultant, whoever it is. But if your business can afford it, hire a trained professional. The important thing is to always be looking for ways to build your strong foundation. This growth that we're talking about can only continue for so long on a weak one, and you don't want to just grow, you want to scale, right? Using debt or expense as leverage, as we discussed, is something that you must consider if you want to grow and scale. Say, spending some SBA loan money on a much needed business truck or a computer. The point is, all these things that we've talked about could mean the difference between finding new opportunities, keeping your commitments, outbidding the competition, or not being able to do any of that. I'll say those again real quick. Finding new opportunities, keeping your commitments, and outbidding the competition. Using your debt and expenses leverage to boost your business, the most that you can do that can literally mean the difference between being able to do those things or not being able to do them at all. And this is where the concept of risk management comes into play. As small business owners, and I've been one myself in the past, it is almost impossible to get out of the paycheck to paycheck mindset, especially if you're like the majority of Americans. The vast majority of Americans do live paycheck to paycheck. And that creates a mindset over time. And it's very, very hard to break out of. And it is 100% understandable. You obviously have to take risk management into account. And you do need rainy day funds. Those are strong foundational aspects of financial literacy. But as one of the understandably scarier aspects of pushing a small business forward, you cannot transfer your individual risk aversion to the management of your business. And that's exactly why getting out of that paycheck to paycheck mindset is hard. And that's okay because, well, being smart and thrifty is probably a large part of why you're a small business owner in the first place. It also means you're capable of taking calculated risks. So think about that, because while pure frugality may be the most effective approach, probably is, to managing your household, in the realm of your business's money, you cannot sit on that nest egg waiting for a rainy day. I'm probably mixing metaphors there, but you get the idea. You need to consider building your foundation, your toolbox, the power that you have in your market space right now, today. The rainy days are always going to be there. They're going to come and go. The modern engine of your business is waiting to be built now, today. And however you've earned or raised or borrowed the money, there are ways to leverage that money that will pay dividends in the long run. Again, this is why you're a small business owner in the first place. Why this matters: your loans or operating capital represent latent opportunity that's just sitting there, tools to fight stagnation. So if you can, definitely use them. And for our last topic here, we are going to talk about setting personal boundaries, sort of a mental health aspect here. And this is probably the most difficult objective to attain in the first place and maintain for young and small businesses. Most small business owners have some form of a familial obligation, whether that is children or a spouse or a parent to take care of or something like that. They typically have obligations in the familial sense that can conflict with them being their own boss. And if you're watching this and you're a small business owner, you've probably experienced that yourself. So it's kind of an abstract concept. We talk about setting personal boundaries, having good mental health. That's great to talk about it, but they're very abstract and oftentimes a lot harder to put into practice in real life. Of course, it goes without saying that it is a vital concept to focus on, though, when you're a small business, especially in the post-2020 world and the ways things have changed, and the workforce and the economy and supply chain, all that disruption taking place. This is again something that you can kind of leverage to help improve your home situation and those dynamics of your personal life with your business life. The idea of mental health as a key component to our overall health is still coming to light. There's a lot of stigma there. Some of that's being removed, and a lot more people are talking about it. And the reality is that our constant internet presence, our technological saturation, it's helped increase visibility of mental health while simultaneously contributing to some problems there, right? So, we have this whole new set of challenges in the 21st century and post 2020 for people who want to start a business or keep their business going. So, new challenges there. Communication is key. We hear that all the time, but it really is true. It boils down to relationships and communication. So, let's think about what this kind of looks like in practice. It's easy enough to say, hey guys, I have to process invoices from like 2 to 5 and I can't be disturbed. Or look, I love you guys, but I absolutely cannot be interrupted when I'm on a call or in a meeting. So what does enforcing that look like though? Is it having a conversation with people? That's something to decide if and when that comes up. And it's something that every entrepreneur must ask themselves, and especially if they're fully committed to building their own business. And also because in those cases, a lot of those small business cases, right, you're either working out of the house or maybe you're in a small rented space or something like that. So the reality is that the understandably strong calling of interacting with and helping out your family and friends will never disappear, especially when you've decided to be your own boss. Simply by definition, your inner circle subconsciously knows that you're not bound to the rules of employment of a larger company, and thus you're more accessible, right? So it's a blessing and a curse, kind of at the same time, because you are your own boss and you are more accessible to your friends and family, and that's what everybody wants, is that kind of work-life balance. But it's a double-edged sword, isn't it, as a small business owner, because you also have to jealously guard your time and space at times with your small business. Otherwise, it's not going to be successful at all. So start the construction of your social and familial boundaries by giving yourself and them a little grace. That's really all it boils down to. Build from there. Engage in grace. And kind of what I mean by that is understanding that your friends and family, they're different people with their own lives. You're your own person with your own life. And there's always a way to work something out. Always. Helping your friends and family see the value in your business is a great place to start. What your efforts mean to you. Placing this understanding alongside your care and concern for them will help them understand this. You obviously need to keep your negotiations balanced, keep the discussion open, let people express themselves, and be kind but firm about your needs, right? Because it's very likely, unless you're completely flying solo and you just have your own business and there's no other concerns you have, that's totally fine. But if you've got anybody else relying on you or anybody else vying for your time, it's having that kind but firm approach and acknowledging them, what their needs are, what they care about, and reminding them of the relationship you have. Saying, you're important to me, absolutely, but my business is too. And so this is a little hypothetical paragraph I typed up on this. You can feel free to put it in your own words. Whenever there's a suggested phrase, it's always a little awkward, right? But this is what I came up with. So I do care about you, and I also care about my dream. Since my dream is that of a business owner, I won't always be available as much as I'd like. But I really appreciate your support and understanding, and in return, I'll do my best to show you the same. And here's why this matters. Showing them the value in your needs while acknowledging theirs, kind of as I mentioned earlier, will help set and maintain boundaries. So it's not just about that healthy respect, it's about mutual healthy respect. As a small business owner, you have an incentive and a responsibility to set these expectations and maintain boundaries while still showing the people you care about that you do in fact care about them. I don't have to tell you guys it's a tough balancing act sometimes, but you're worth it and they're worth it and your vision is absolutely worth it. All right, so that concludes this presentation on tuning up your small business. Thank you if you've stayed this long. We're at just over an hour here. Again, my name is Chris Baker. I am a supportive services representative for the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise program. You can see the number there on the screen and email. Please reach out with any questions. We are here for you. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.